the most promising thing that I have seen is this research into psychedelic therapy-assisted psychedelic.
Does that make sense to you that psychedelics work so well for such difficult cases?
Yes,
What is it
it makes
about
perfect sense to
psychedelics?
me. And I've been following this research from the
Yeah,
beginning when
there's
they
some
were doing
excellent
end of
research on this.
life. Yeah, they started with end of life patients. I don't know, maybe 20 years ago. I met at a TED conference. I met one of the doctors who was doing this research. It was the first time I became aware that the research was happening, and I'd already had my own experiences before that. And so it made perfect sense to me that this would work. It was still astonishing to see the results, to see how successful um, the work is so much of the time, but it doesn't surprise me. It makes sense. And it's actually in line with all of these other things. So quieting down the default mode network. One of the things that's so transformative about taking something like psilocybin, and everyone's experience is different. It can vary each time you take it, even in a single person. But the experience I had and the experience that many people have that is so transformative is this feeling that's very hard to describe, but it's a feeling of being one with the universe. And that comes with, it's kind of all one feeling that is, again, hard to put into words, but there's this feeling that everything is okay. And I'd never had that feeling before in my life. And when I took psychedelics, that feeling would stay with me for months. And I never understood why, and it was always fascinating to me, but it was as if I was glimpsing a deeper truth of the world, that it's all one thing, we're all connected. There's no sense that there could even be a feeling of loneliness. It was just this visceral sense of being one with everything, and that everything was okay, that all the things I was afraid of, even death, that the universe, in a sense, is an endless recycling. And I don't know, it's hard to describe. But we also know on the other side that depression and anxiety, when people are experiencing those things, the default mode network is more active.
Yeah.
And so it's this cycling and this kind of obsessive cycles of thinking about one's self that is a huge part of the suffering in the first place. And so the one thing that's surprising to me about the research is that I may be fudging the data, but it's something like 80% of people who are treated for PTSD after only one session are cured of their PTSD.
Yeah, the effect stays for prolonged periods of time.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
And addiction as well, which is interesting. That's not something I'm like personally familiar with. So that was a surprise to me. But yeah, I mean, it's just wonderful that we...
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, of course, it's also incredible for people who don't suffer to see what psychedelics can do with the mind, which is that kind of appreciation.
Well, and I think it's actually important for this work. It's one of the questions I ask everyone I talk to for this series. Many of them, I won't be able to use that audio.
Ask them
for a
if they've
lot of
done
them.
psychedelics.
Yes, and what their experience was, and if that's informed. Actually, initially in the 50s, I want to do more research on this and look into it. But in the 50s, there were some studies that were being done with scientists there were hundreds of scientists they put into the study where they were on the brink of some kind of discovery, where they were stuck. So they had been doing research and they were stuck, and they used psychedelics to come up with an answer, to find a path forward. And it was extremely useful for that.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. And the nice thing about psychedelics, from my perception, is that they don't currently suffer from the taboo that weed does.
That's interesting.
I don't think. So, like, for example, there's some kind of cultural construct about a pothead that makes it so that, like Elon got in trouble for smoking weed.
Right. But he would have gotten in trouble for taking mushrooms too.
I don't know.
Really?
I don't think so.
Oh, that's interesting.
I don't think
that's
so.
That's a surprise to me.
Because mushrooms to me seem like a journey. Like, there's a perception that you don't take mushrooms all the time. It's not an addictive substance. It's not a lifestyle. it's like going to Burning Man. It's
Yeah.
like a experience that stays with you for a long time.
Didn't realize that understanding had permeated into the culture.
Yeah, that's a good question of how if it has or not, because maybe I have a very narrow perspective of these kinds of things. But I think
Yeah.
what has permeated is through Hollywood ideas of what it means to be a person who smokes weed a lot,
Yeah.
and that has has had its effect, which is hilarious given the effects of weed versus alcohol.
Right.
But that's a whole nother story.
Have you taken psychedelics?
Yes.
And you've spoken about it on your podcast?
Yeah. Psilocybin. Well, not a lot. I really want to do a lot more. I've taken
Yeah.
mushrooms.
Aspirations.
Yeah, I mean, because
Oh,
it was
I know.
such
So do I.
and I didn't have. I have a very addictive personality, so I'm very nervous about substances.
Mm,
But I didn't have any addictive relationship with that
yeah.
thing. Well, every time
It is a treatment for addiction. So
interesting, but I, I'm almost nervous because every time I've taken mushrooms, I've had a really pleasant experience. I mean, it was
mm,
it's already the thing I feel anyway,
yeah.
but I feel it more intensely. The thing I feel anyway is like appreciation of the moment, how beautiful life is. The weird thing that I feel, not throughout the day, but certain moments of the day, especially early on, that's like life is intensely beautiful. Like that's usually when I'll tweet.
Yeah.
It's like everything is awesome. And I remember those feelings because sometimes when I feel really down and all those kinds of things,
Mm,
you remember that like it's a roller coaster and and then you find the good feelings and it's cool. And it does make me a little bit sad that they kind of fade. But then
mm,
as they get older, you get to use those moments. You realize they don't use them well. Use when you feel great, when you're focused, all that kind
yeah.
of stuff. Use them well.
Yeah.
Because the mind is a roller coaster.
Yes, it's true. That's partly why I do this work. I feel like my work is therapy. I don't know if you feel that way.
Work is therapy.
This work, not work in general. Thinking about the deep questions, thinking about the nature of the universe, thinking about consciousness, even meditation. I mean, I got into meditation. To me, it's interesting. To me, I mean, I think a lot of meditators feel this way about it, but I think just I'm thinking about it from the perspective of someone who hasn't meditated before, but it feels like a scientific experiment. It feels like it's the same physicist in me who was drawn to meditation because the experience is one of getting closer to your experience and asking similarly deep questions like, what is time? What does that even mean? What do I mean by time? What does it feel like? What is a thought is one of the most interesting questions to me.